Welcome to part 2 of my look at The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. Part 1 set up the foundation, so now let's take a look at the game itself. There are going to be spoilers in this review, nothing overly big though, and I will only include video from only about the first third or so portion of the game. So with that said, let's get to it. Going to go ahead and come out and say that I think that Skyward Sword is the weakest of the Nintendo-made Zelda titles. Now, even having said that, it is a good game. I think it would be difficult for anyone to argue that any of the Nintendo-made Zelda titles are bad games. I just believe that this one is the worst of the bunch. The story is, in the end, the same thing as it always is. Everything is going well until Zelda is lost and we must go and save her. I do like the game sort of establishing Zelda before she is lost though. Things like traversing the lands, dungeon crawling, and boss battles all make their return in a rather lengthy game. Since the game takes place in the distant past, Hyrule doesn't exist yet, and supposedly the Triforce hasn't been given its physical form yet. You of course play as the hero of Destiny, Link, and you must go and gather weapons and abilities throughout the land in order to rescue Zelda and destroy the great evil. Now let's address the biggest innovation of the game, the motion controls. The game allows the player to control Link's sword and other various items with a close to one-to-one movement with the Wiimote with Motion Plus. I say close to one-to-one because while it works great when things are calm, it just can't keep up perfectly when a lot of fast movement is done. This by no means creates a problem with the game. Yeah, the controls get off-centered a lot, but that hardly ever hindered gameplay. Now, I know there are quite a few people out there that had trouble getting the motions to work right at all. I did at the beginning as well. Here is what I found to help me get it to work. The placement of the sensor bar is important. I have found that having it on top of my TV, no matter the size or how far it is off the ground, was better than having it below. Second, always make sure that the batteries in the Wiimote aren't too low. I say if it falls below 2/3, change out the batteries. This game takes up more juice than your normal Wii games, so keep an eye on how much is left. Finally, distance from your TV plays a big role as well. The motes are infrared, so interference is always going to be there, and the further from the TV you are, the more interference you are likely to pick up. Also, there is a lot of data flowing between your Wii and your remote, so the shorter the distance, the quicker it will be processed. In addition to the above-mentioned steps, there are a few limitations to the hardware that needs to be remembered as well. And yes, these are limitations that are present in both the Sony Move and even in your infrared PC mouse as well. The Wiimote will only send data to the Wii when it is moved. After a bit of non-movement, the device will go into something like standby mode and requires a split second to come back on. So, say you are running around, which is done with a nunchuck, and you need to draw your sword. You may notice a delay in the response to your motion. Not only can this cause the center to be out of whack, but the system can misread your position and can cause you trouble with the next command that you send. Most of the time it will fix itself, but it can be frustrating when this happens in battle. Link's swordsmanship is pretty simple. You have the common horizontal, vertical, and diagonal sweeps. In addition, you also have a stab option, flip jump movements, and a takedown attack as well. It may take a while to get used to how the sweeps work, but it is rather simple to pull off. Your shield is controlled primarily with your nunchuck and can be used to bounce objects back by moving the controller forward. All in all, I liked the motion controls for this game. In fact, I like just about all the controls for this game. I do, however, have two major problems surrounding the motion controls. One, it is fairly obvious from the start that the motion controls is the main focus of the game. The motion controls, while innovative, is a tool used for interaction with the game and shouldn't consume the game itself. It is the controller for the game and not what should define the game. It's like saying Wind Waker is the greatest game ever because GameCube controller is awesome. No doubt, at bare minimum, we should expect a game to work great with the controller it was designed for, but the game should not be built around the controller itself. 2. If you are going to strive and make a game one-to-one movement, you need to recognize that there are left-handers out there as well. Being one of those left-handers, I had a difficult time getting comfortable with having to use my right hand for the motions, and even then I am nowhere as fast, accurate, or responsive as I would have been had I had the sword in my left hand. This extends to using the menus and items as well. With all that said about the controls, my views of the game aren't impacted by them. Controllers will never please everyone, and as long as the game is still playable and the controls aren't frustrating, I can't see it as a negative. Link and Zelda are both stock characters. Link is still the outcast of sorts, and Zelda is sort of still a princess. Link seems more clueless than ever, which is odd since he has had actual knight training in this world, and I hate to say it, he pretty much just does what he is told throughout the entire game. He is still a silent protagonist, and nothing happens to change or grow the character throughout the game. He also technically has everything he needs to beat the end boss at the start of the game. Zelda's role in the game is pointless, and only put there so that she can have more screen time than normal. She has your typical damsel in distress type personality. She starts off strong and independent, but that goes away once she is taken away. Yes, she technically is never captured in the game, but things play out the same as if she was, so it really doesn't make much of a difference. Impa returns as the bodyguard for Zelda, and her character is the same as in any other game she is in. I have to ask though, why can't Link be the bodyguard? He is supposed to be a knight. Have them save a village or something during the game. They turn out to be the Shaka or whatever. They pledge their assistance to Zelda and help her throughout the game. You know, they get introduced this way, and we get something different for both Impa and Zelda. Alas, that is not the case. The Navi for the game is Fi, a spiritual representation of the Master Sword. And oh boy, if you think Navi was annoying, then you are in for a treat. She is supposed to be the medium for the goddess, and unlike Navi, she does come equipped with some special abilities, but man, she gets very annoying. She talks a lot. Her warnings and stuff like that get really tiresome after a while, or even by the first time they get tiresome. But I feel that there's a lot of wasted material with her. I won't spoil what happens with her at the end, but it is a great ending for the character, and it could have been much better had there been some build up to it throughout the game. We get a new villain for the series named Garahim, and I'm almost 100% sure that someone during the development of the game suggested his name should have been Ognim, or however you say it, basically the wizard from Link to the Past. Garahim is a wizard servant for Demise, and is the source of most of Link's trouble throughout the game. Aside from his, should we say, questionable look and attitude, I am sort of glad that he was someone new, at least at first. I won't spoil Demise, but he is Ganon and everything save the name, which in the game reduces Garahim to a lackey like most other Zelda titles, and he becomes stale because of it. Had they not made Garahim so hands-on, which I don't mind as long as he actually wins sometimes, and removed Demise, I would have thought more highly about the character. As it stands, it is nothing new. The world is very, very small compared to the other Zelda games. It won't take long before you have already been to the 4 different area types. Yes, the areas sort of expand, more on that later. However, you also only have 2 shops total in the game, both right next to each other, by the way, 1 village, and a ton of reuse of already explored areas. Skyloft, which is your home base of sorts, is completely underwhelming. There is no Thieves Guild to deal with, no chickens to irritate. The only way you get items outside of dungeons and stories is by purchasing them, with one exception, instead of the normal, what you would expect, getting them through quests. All the quests you get from people are things that they are just too lazy to do themselves. And above all else, the village is very small and it never changes. Yes, you have a poorly implemented day and night mechanic, which can only be used here at Skyloft or at a tavern. However, that is only there so that you can get more pointless quests that you couldn't get or do during the day. As for the rest of the Sky area, I said in part 1 that Hyrule Field was pointless to the game. It served no purpose other than to make the world seem larger. Skyward Sword doesn't even have that as an excuse. Everything is spread out in Skyward Sword for no purpose whatsoever. You have 3 warps, which takes you to the different areas below the clouds, a few mini-games spread out, a tavern, treasure chests, and an ancient temple, sort of. Not a dungeon, and that's it. There is no reason why all of that couldn't have been brought into one big landmass. You don't even get the feeling like you're going into a new area like Ocarina, since you can only go into different areas via a warp. There are no dungeons or land masses even close to the size of Skyloft in the sky. It is just a big waste of time overall. Epuna is replaced with a giant bird, and just like Epuna, is totally pointless to have. There is one forced instance in which you use your bird for anything meaningful, and that is only for about 5 minutes. The bird doesn't fly you down into the different areas. It doesn't even fly you to different locations within those areas. The bird is only there because the sky was made unnecessarily big. Give Wind Waker a little credit. At least long sea voyages make sense, and you have the sense of exploring with it. On a side note, would it really have killed them to put a compass on screen as you're flying around? Now for the 3 areas below the clouds: the forest, mountain / volcano, and the desert area, sort of. All 3 areas aren't your typical Zelda areas, which may sound like a good thing, but not really. In essence, the 3 areas are dungeons that get you to the true dungeons. All dungeons, save for 1, are in these 3 different areas. The game can basically be separated out into 3 different chapters of varying length. Each chapter has a corresponding dungeon in each of the 3 different areas. In essence, the areas are reused 3 different times, with some changes to the area for each chapter. I know it is a Zelda formula since the SNES to reuse areas already explored, mostly to take advantage of hardware limitations of the time. However, it is an old practice now, and it has been proven time and time again that you don't have to do that. Something like this is pitiful when compared to other games out there. Even Xenoblade for the Wii had a bigger world than this. You can't even travel between areas. You have to warp up to the sky first and then go to the other land. This really makes the world feel more like levels instead of adventuring. Last thing I have to say about the worlds: there is no enemy variations between the worlds. Dungeons are a different story, and I'll get to those in a bit, but the real difference between the enemies in the different lands is their type of damage they do. Again, something common to Zelda series, but it has proven that it doesn't have to be, and this really needs to be updated to more modern terms. I do have to give kudos to the desert area, though. It seems like that is the only area that really mixes things up when you're traveling through it. Not only is there a time change thing to deal with, love the music changes when stepping in and out of the affected area, by the way, but the area actually changes rather drastically as more of it gets unlocked. A staple for the series is that the dungeons and boss battles are always epic, and for the most part that holds true here. The first set of dungeons are actually rather boring, but then they start spicing them up. One thing that is sorely missing, though, are the puzzles. There is really only one dungeon that has a puzzle. Won't spoil it, but it is in the last dungeon. With one exception, all the dungeons had recycled themes from past games in the series. For example, if you played older Zelda games and you entered a room with an eyeball over the door, then you already know what you are going to need to do in order to get past it. Outside of the last dungeon, the other exception for this is the pirate ship dungeon, which is my favorite dungeon, minus the boss. Again, I won't spoil it, but the dungeon actually had actions that you needed to take that weren't immediately obvious. Boss battles, with a few exceptions, were rather fun. I even liked Garahim's fights. I did find them a bit too easy, though. Not only is there an overabundance of fairies in this world, but the number of hearts you have and the amount of hearts found while fighting the boss just made most of them seem rather easy. Of course, there is a solution to this, and I will actually mention that at the end of the review, or near the end of the review. Is it just me also, is it just me, or does it seem that we are getting fewer and fewer dungeons as well? I think Skyward Swords had maybe one more than Twilight, but it seems like the number has been steadily going down since Link to the Past. Gameplay is where I have probably the most amount of issues with the game. Let's start off with the collection fetish the game has. Don't believe me? Well, let's take a short list here. You got an overabundance of bugs that you have to collect throughout the world. You got an overabundance amount of materials which you have to collect throughout the world. You have a healthy amount of what's things called gratitude crystals that you have to collect as well. Your first mission after descending from the sky really is find 3 kiwis. Then your first introduction to the mountain volcano world is finding 5 pieces of a key. Then in the desert world, you have to find 3 generators. And after that, you start your trials, 4 of them total throughout the game, where you collect soul beads. All of that is just about the first third or so of the game. There are a lot more after this. I know collecting things are a staple for the series when it went 3D. You had those spider skull things in Ocarina, that scary bug lady in Twilight, but they went way over the edge here. I don't think you are given a quest that isn't a collecting request. Actually, I take that back. There's at least one line of quests that aren't. Epic, I know. This is annoying. Where are the "My sacred statue was stolen from Thieves Guild's" quests, or some sort of quest that actually makes you feel like, oh, I don't know, the hero of legend or something. Speaking of bugs and materials, what is up with this crafting nonsense? Not only does it create a plot hole, how does my crafting dude know how to fix things with material neither of which he would have had seen or known about, but why add something like this at all? Why can't we have optional dungeons or something to explore and get the updates that way? You know, like adventuring instead of doing tedious item gathering. Potion upgrades, really? Again, with the whole not having seen the majority of these bugs before thing, but why is this needed? Why not just sell the potion to fill up all my hearts? Or better yet, have multiple stores that can do different things? It just doesn't make sense. You can't mix and match the ingredients to come up with a unique effect on an item or potion. It is all scripted. You have no customization at all, and so basically this makes it look like this was a feature that they looked at other games out there and said, oh, these all have a crafting mechanic, we better add something to it, so let's slap something together and put it in there. It's just a huge wasted time. The quests that you are given, was it really Miyamoto's idea to turn Link into a glorified errand boy for people too lazy to do it themselves? I know this is something that has been there since Ocarina, but it is a very bad and old mechanic. It is one thing to run across an item while adventuring and finding a purpose for it later. It is totally another to only be able to collect it once asked, and even then only one at a time once the story progresses to a certain point. My quest issues don't even end there, or end with those side quests, but the story progression ones as well. You are told from the beginning that you are this hero of destiny, chosen warrior of the goddess, wielder of the sacred blade. But then why is half the missions I do have to do with me proving myself worthy to be the goddess chosen one? It just doesn't make sense. I can go on and on about the gameplay, the pointless text options, the non-skippable dialogue, the fact we have to be told what a heart is, etc. But the two biggest complaints I have are probably why all of the above exists in the first place. One, and this has been a growing problem since Ocarina. Wind Waker tried to fix it a little, but that is the linear gameplay. Skyward Sword is the definition of a 3D, 2D side-scrolling game. You have no freedom to do what you want. New areas only become available during story progression. Even the dungeons are linear, even more so than Ocarina. Remember the NES days where you can reach the boss and beat them without getting the item in the dungeon? Heck, Link's Awakening, at least you had to find a dungeon key in some other area before you could enter. This is just way too sad, and really shows a lack of creativity for the game. You can't even really, there's no real point to go to other areas when outside of the story progression, with the exception of having to collect those useless bugs and materials. Ironically enough, the only time in the game when you actually kind of have a choice on where to go is where the game destroying glitch is. Number two, the game is way too easy. Everything is spelled out for you. There is always a stone tablet telling you how to clear a room. There is always someone telling us where to go next. And what is it with this dowsing effect? Why can't we just go and try and find the stuff on our own? Anyone remember back in the day that it was actually somewhat challenging just to find the dungeons? I don't like to harp on a game that is rather good so much, so let's end this review with some positives. The graphics are something like a mixture of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. It does exactly what it needs to do. I love the distance effects, and the environments I think look better than anything else I have seen on the Wii. Music is one thing that just gets better and better in the series. I believe that Skyward Sword is the first to have fully orchestrated scores in the game. Twilight might be, I don't remember, and it really does show. There are way too many tracks to mention. Have been playing some of them in the background of this review, but my personal favorite is Faye's theme, which sadly I didn't really notice that being played too much during the game. Combat is fantastic, despite my grievances with the motion controls. I enjoyed the swordplay mechanic very much. Once more, I don't want to spoil it, but that last part, battling to Girahim, the battle with Girahim, and then the Demise battle probably tops the Wind Waker battle against Ganon in my book. The end battle in the Zelda games seems to just keep getting better and better. It sort of also makes it even sadder that there isn't a replay boss battle mode or something that you can do after beating the game. Last thing I want to say about the game before wrapping this up, it is both a high praise and a major complaint. I mentioned several times in the review that I thought that the game was way too easy. While this doesn't change the story, puzzles, and whatnot, Hero Mode is by far the better way to play this game. It forces you to think and not go crazy, especially when going up against the big bosses. I know when I went up against Girahim for the first time in Hero Mode, I was very excited about the gameplay. I enjoyed it far more than my first run through, and that feeling just grew further and further I went into the game. Of course, the heart metal sort of ruins it, but that is definitely the way to go in my book. My big complaint about it, though, is why isn't Hero Mode an option during the first playthrough? I know back in the day, we stupid Americans didn't understand how difficulty settings worked, so it was taken out in most games. But we have evolved since then, so please give us that option to begin with. The Zelda series, like Nintendo, has earned my respect. I also think that the series deserves a tougher look than most other games. Otherwise, the game will turn into something like Final Fantasy or something else that really only survives because of the name. I want to continue to be excited about the next game. However, both Twilight Princess and this one have really made it difficult for me. This game just felt like someone reminded Nintendo that it was Zelda's 25th year and they had to pump something out because of it. If you own a Wii and are on the fence about the game, then do yourself a favor and at least rent it. It is well worth a playthrough. I would recommend, though, if possible, see if you can't borrow a friend's save file so you can play the Hero Mode initially. Like everything else in life, it is wrong to complain about something and not have better alternatives to give. So here is my short list of what I want to see in the next Zelda game. Number 1, no new Zelda for 3 or 4 years. Harsh, I know, but it needs time to breathe. Oversaturation isn't a good thing when it comes to gaming. Now, I have no problems with more things like the 4 swords or stuff like that, or more handhelds or whatever. Just no new serious Zelda game. And to add to that, make it only one Zelda game per console life. Number 2, or should I say, make it one game or at least one story. So if you want to make, a part 1 and a part 2, that's fine, but one story per console. Number 2, no Zelda, Hyrule, or Ganon. Ganon is like Shredder from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He loses so often, he is not a threat. Let's try and do something new here. I have no problems with Zelda or even Hyrule kind of being the cameo where you start, but let's actually try and evolve the series a little bit by bringing in some quote-unquote new blood. Number 3, enlarge the world. Make several cities and villages. Take a cue from some anime in that time period. I want to get lost in a city doing stuff. I want it to take several sit-throughs to travel between the cities, adventuring along the way. You know, kind of getting lost in the side streets and not really having a place to go, or, you know, make it feel like you're actually exploring the world, and instead of always having to go from point A to point B to point C. Number 4, make dungeons extremely difficult and optional. The whole going to a dungeon, getting an item, use item to defeat the boss, and repeat has gotten very, very old. Make dungeons something that you can find while going about the world. Make them epic, and I'm talking multiple sit-throughs. As far as what we would consider progressional dungeons or whatever, make them quests or something instead. Like, you have to clear the road between the two cities, or be a bodyguard for whatever, or, you know, or stop a thieves guild in a city. You know, let's mix it up a little bit instead of your old tried and true fare. Number 5, no clear antagonist. I know this is a big no-no when it comes to telling a story, but really, what is wrong with having Link just going around the land, adventuring as he goes? I am even fine with having a cabal or something after him, or perhaps have the Shika and Grudo, the whatever those minions of Ganon are, in some sort of war going on around Link. You know, if you want to do like a 2-parter story, have kind of like the cabal be introduced or something, and then have in the sequel having Link bring them down. Or if you're going to use the war idea, you know, kind of let him choose some sides, or let his actions affect one way or the other without you actually physically doing one way or another. Saying, like, if you run in a quest that says go save this boy, you know, you either, if you succeed, it will help one side or the other. If you fail, it will help the other side. You know, add in those types of options or something like that. And number 6, would like to see Link not be a silent hero anymore. You know, it was fine back in the day. You weren't really telling a story, and it kind of made sense for him not to have to talk, but really that just doesn't work anymore. If you're telling a story and you're trying to get his feelings, his opinions, and you're trying to make him out to being some sort of you know, big bad warrior or hero or whatever, then he needs to be able to talk and respond. Now, I will add to that, no voice acting. Please keep it no voice acting. I can just imagine how Garahim could really be ruined by the wrong voice actor. Same goes for Link, same goes for Zelda. Video games, especially from Nintendo, really don't have a very good track record yet when it comes to voice acting. You know, yeah, there are a lot of games out there outside of Nintendo, and even a few from Nintendo that actually are somewhat decent, but their track record just isn't that good. You know, either need to take cues from like Funimation or something to kind of improve on how this is all done. Maybe use some of those voice actors. Just it's not it's not there yet. And if you use the wrong voice actors for some of these characters, then it's really going to ruin the game moving forward. However, add skippable text, please. It's fine to have the option to always be told your hearts are low or something like that, or told how to do things or whatever, but especially if you're going to have repeated text, make it skippable, please. Well, that is kind of where I stand on the series as a whole. Please let me know in the comments below what you would like to see in the next Zelda game. Do you want to see one further in the future? Do you want to actually see some changes in the formula done? Do you want more of the same? Kind of let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching both parts of this. It's not really a review, but kind of a look into the game. So, as always, thanks for watching again, and God bless.